So welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
And Reid and I just made a pact that we were not going to do a separate intro for this podcast. So mostly because we're strapped for time and we needed to do an episode. And so I was like, well, let's just do an episode on a topic that's near and dear to Reid's heart, which is how to scale content for apartment websites, or I'll just say apartments, because I wanted to read if you're going to go a little bit into social or not, because I know we haven't really gotten at that so much. But the whole impetus for this is obviously most apartment websites are pretty small. They're like 5 or 7 pages. There's not a ton of content there, or what content's there is almost so washed out. I say washed out because I feel like every property almost reads the same. Right. At least maybe it's just our client set. We have a lot of luxury high-end properties. And so if you go from one website to another, it's almost like you could interchange any paragraph with another property. And it really ends up blanding up the world where you don't have a lot of there's just not a lot of color that gets in on the websites. And then obviously this, of course, hurts your SEO because you have such a small website and just not a lot of content for Google to crawl and really say well, why the heck is this property better for this searcher than that other property? Because they just kind of read the same. So Reid, maybe that's the jumping off point, but I know you have a lot of different thoughts on, about why people don't do content for apartments, but then kind of the implications of that. And then perhaps why they should consider putting some resources there.
Yeah. Well, resources is the perfect, segue for me. Because that's the main reason, at least that's what we've been told, is they don't either have the budget or they don't have the manpower to support something like that. And then right underneath that is, even if we did, would there be an ROI behind it? Because the ILSs have hijacked, the SERP results for the majority of the keywords they'd be interested in. And then the third is the technical side, which is, there's too many restrictions or challenges in getting content up anyways. So those are the three, main reasons, and I don't want to call them excuses because they're real, that most marketers and brands don't push out a lot of content or don't develop it. And I do want to include, I appreciate you saying, are we going to gear this more towards the website, or are we going to include things like social? And I think we should. I think we should talk about the full spectrum, because there's different solutions, at least in my mind, when you're thinking about the different platforms, on how you'd approach something like this. But I think, I think it was 2 years ago, David. No, maybe it was 3. God, it was early for us when we were at TechCon. It was one of the first trade shows we went to, and it was in our own backyard. And one of the featured speakers was the president from 30 Lines. And he was talking about, how they approach things. And I think he was doing a plug for their chatbot or something, but just about the importance of factoring for all the research. And of course, as always, the customer journey in buying an apartment, and how really the property itself is kind of the last consideration. He was just really trying to stress the fact that people are really making a determination on where they're going to live. 90% of it happens before they even get to a website. And I think that I totally agree with him. And so for me, that helps, at least at a high level, somebody think about how would we reverse engineer the content. So let's just imagine the resources aren't a problem, that, we can figure that part out. We'll find the budget and we'll have somebody that can actually develop the content. But then, what does that roadmap look like, or strategically, how do we approach that? And I think that's a great place to start. And as I even reflect back, whether it's an apartment I lived in, or whether it's, moving to a new market when I came up from Austin to Denver, it just proved his point. We did not sit there and start going directly to houses. For us, everything was kind of what's happening in and around, and what are those kind of key topics that we would be researching. And I think that's where the opportunity is. So that's my preamble. I know we'll start kind of deconstructing this further, but that's my general thought.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit of quality versus quantity, because on a podcast we had recently with the Origin folks, they were talking a lot about messaging, right? On how your property's copy really leads into the sales cycle and to a property, and really sets the tone for what someone thinks of a property as they show up and take a tour and then start to lease out. So maybe, and I feel like I already know your answer, so I'm sort of smiling to myself, but how do you think about quality versus quantity of the content?
Well, you don't do yourself a whole lot of favors if you focus too much on one, but I am a big proponent of quality. I think, and you kind of teed it up with the conversation with Origin, but you things could backfire quickly if you start putting out garbage. And that's the first impression, because you only get one shot at that, right? And that's how they initially experience the apartment before they really delve in. So I think that if I had to choose between one, I'd definitely prioritize the quality. But that being said, if you are pumping out one good piece of content every 6 months, that's not going to do you a whole lot of good either. So you're going to have to find a way to be more prolific and still maintain the quality.
Yeah. And then there's a slightly different view there of maybe on the website versus off the website. So let me just take a leap here and say, if it's on the website, that copy is going to live there for some time, if not always. So probably start with the standard pages on a website. Make sure that there's quality content and it is setting the tone for that leasing cycle and just what you want someone's first impression to be before they even talk to a human. But if it's off the website, and I'll say social, not that social doesn't need quality content, because we both believe in that, but the half-life of social content is so short that if I was going to spend my hours, I'd be spending 10 times the amount on what I'm writing on my website versus what I'm doing for a social post. And then going back to the website after the social, then there would be the more, if you had some sort of content generation or development plan, such as a blog or some neighborhood, pages or articles, but something that you were going to slowly add to over time. I think the risk is kind of trying to boil the ocean here, where you're saying, hey, I'm going to have a blog and I'm going to do 3 posts a week. It's that's just not something you can get to probably as an apartment. But you could probably do well, shoot, I'm going to write a more specific neighborhood, I don't know, article, let's call it, or an additional neighborhood page once a month. So once a month, I'm going to add a page about the coffee shops nearby. And once a month, I'm going to add a page about the nearby dog walking routes or whatever the heck. Right. Would you agree with all that, or would you push back on any?
No, I totally agree with that. I was going to say the content roadmap is critical. Getting that frequency down and then getting, the categories of content themselves. And obviously we've been knee deep in that now for over a year on more the social side of things. And it's nearly impossible, I think to develop decent quantity, and quality or whatever, and not have that figured out. So I think kind of the cadence you were just quickly whipping up off the cuff, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then there's if I'm going to stick on website for a second, something we started to get into when Aaron from Origin was pinging us at the end of the podcast. He was saying, well, what about personalization? Right. And I think the easiest way for apartments to get it, and so this is, obviously content involves the email follow-ups you might be sending. So I would say if I'm an apartment or if I'm advising an apartment, I'd say let's focus on that when it comes to, maybe I don't have the capacity to write 500-word blogs or article pages. My CMS doesn't allow it, but there's a lot you can do around content when it comes to the follow-up. And that's probably way more obtainable. It's easier to use a WYSIWYG email editor for follow-ups on customers and give them more of that personalized experience after the fact. And then if you can get just the simple nuts and bolts. So I've got my website, I've got my social, now I've got my email follow-up chain. Great. Now, if you start to feel really confident and kind of get a little froggy, then you can start to say okay, do I want to work on a continuous content development plan? Or would I rather work on a scalable personalization plan? And this is what we started to talk with Aaron about. And but okay, someone's gone to your website, they've called, and they're now in your CRM. They've got the email follow up, but they haven't closed yet. But they come back to your website. Should they have the same experience on your website then, or should there be a different experience? So there's small things you can do with whether it's different chat bots or pop-ups or something that give a slightly different, personalized experience versus getting super crazy where necessarily you're changing out like the intro paragraph or something like that. But that's kind of if I was building a roadmap for somebody, because if you think about this, and I'll just stand on the soapbox for one more minute here, but if you think about like writing all these articles or blogs, it's hard to take those articles and blogs and use them on the rest of your portfolio. But the email follow-up, you do it kind of for one property and you kind of have the meat of it. Now you just change out the name and the logo for the next property and the next one, right? And same thing with this customer personalization, tactic. It's like you kind of figure out your tech stack for that once, and then you start to take it to your other properties. And so your sweat equity, 90% of that is on the first one. After that, it's like 10% as you keep rolling out across your portfolio.
It's an excellent point, because I think that's exactly the right way to approach it, which is go all in on one property, but be mindful along the way. Like, don't do it blindly, but that, the ultimate goal here is how do we leverage this model, across our portfolio. And I also love what you're saying just about, the small tweaks as far as when a visitor, like if they've come in 6 times, that they're not getting the exact same experience. And that's easy to get at with ad campaigns. We already do that with retargeting. So, send them different creative. If they're on a floor plan page and then, they're on Amazon or wherever they are, that they get something, related to that. And then if they're on amenities another day, that they get, ad campaign that is focused more around that. So that's simple stuff. But it's not unrealistic to pull that off, maybe in a little bit less of a, I guess, sophisticated or custom way with content. So love that you were adding that as well. I was just writing down a few things, like I guess thoughts while you were talking through that. But the ROI is one of the things we not personally have to address, but I think key stakeholders involved with let's just say an initiative like this would certainly need to, or it would just come up, which is this worth it? Even if we could mitigate the amount of cost, what is the ROI between or coming from this kind of effort? And that's still hard for us to say, because being frank, right, none of our clients have really figured this out, or we haven't brought it to them. And it's exciting because I know that we have a lot in the works that over the back half of the year, we're going to be introducing that I think is going to make this more real for our client base. But it's still unknown to me, like how much more are their conversion rates? How will they improve? What will that organic rank? Because, moving from number 87 to number 63, isn't really super helpful. And so you have to be prepared to speak through that. It's like, is it first page or bust? Like, how much value is there in this whole content effort? I think you would see it in the conversions, just to before you even ask me, but that would be what I would look for the most. And you'd see kind of all boats rise, I'm guessing, on the metrics, but time on site, bounce rate would improve, average, session duration, the amount of research being done on the site, and all that then translates to better paid media conversions as well as your organic traffic.
Yeah, I think some of this is really interesting. If we compare it to our own experience as a company. So we talk a lot about the content flywheel from Digible, right? Where it's like, well, we've got our blogs that are going, we've got the podcasts that are going, we've now got the comic strip and the custom memes, and so just really now. Obviously, we have a large team of people that are kind of doing this as, I'll say, for fun on the side, just like this podcast is. But it really seems in the last 2 months, it's really clicked. Meaning if you look at our LinkedIn followers, it's like in the last 30 days, they've increased, I think it's like 18%, which I think we had 3,000 followers. So adding 18% is not small. It's more than I think in the last 60 days, we've added 1,500 people, but I feel like it's just the addition of slowly this flywheel adding up. Now, if you're an apartment, that story may scare you, right? Because you're like, oh, shoot, you've been doing this. How long have you been working on content, Digible? Really probably 2 years, but this podcast started 7 months ago, but that's still a lot, right? Meaning that's still a lot of effort. If you think about the return, But I think there's more to that than just the numbers of like followers, engagement. It's kind of like what you're saying. Like you always talk about like taking a snapshot, a benchmark of like your time on site, conversion rate, click through rate, all of this stuff for an apartment. And that's how I think you'd have to go about it. Is you're not going to be able to attribute this exactly back to that neighborhood article you wrote or whatever. But if you do all of this stuff, there's just all these micro signals that are hitting these different algorithms like Google and Facebook and what have you, that add up over time. And all of a sudden the algorithm clicks and it's like, oh, there you go. So I think, and again, why that might be scary for an apartment is, you might have that property for 18 months. So like, how much effort am I going to put into this one for like, if we're going to lease it up and sell it off? So that's where I come back to the scalable thing you started to talk about, where it's like, as you said, like maybe take an asset that you're going to have for a while. So you can run lots of different experiments on it. Then you can run the experiments of the email campaign and then the personalized messaging and then the article page or whatever, custom, real true custom social hyperlocal content. And then once you learn what that is, now you can take that and say, okay, how can I lift this and make it, I might have to genericize it slightly to take it to the rest of my portfolio. But now I've tried all these other things and I know this works. And I'll just stick on the email follow-up because I think it's such an underutilized tool. And so it's such an easy win for the properties.
Yep. If you and I were playing Scrabble, would you lay down genericize?
Probably not, because I wouldn't know how to spell it even.
I was trying to think how to spell it too. Oh man, that's a classic Staley. Well, one of the things I'll take somewhat of a right turn, as you say, or reflect back on when I was at the newspaper, both at the Post, but also at the Statesman. And, there's a lot of downsizing in newsrooms. And so there was immense pressure on, the journalists to find ways to be more prolific and, of course, still maintaining that quality. And so they were all frequently, and I felt for them, just complaining, stressed out. It's like, I simply can't keep up or produce the volume that you guys are looking for. And so they, for a very different reason, were trying to figure out, how can we scale content? How can we find ways to produce content that don't put that kind of stress on our own resources? And that let's let them be the best in the world at what they do. And then we're going to find ways to subsidize the content. And so I think that's also, as we start to maybe transition, I'll just say a little bit more into solutions. Why not use more user-generated content? I mean, I think, it's like, well, we don't want our residents blogging on our site. And I understand that, but don't just give up on that idea, because that can take a lot of the pressure off, but it also builds culture. I mean, hell, you and I, keep up with this podcast as much as we can, but it's been great, obviously, being able to lean on others to participate and while they're not just taking on the whole thing, just being able to lean on somebody else is a big part of it. The other part is, of course, the technical side, which we're going to be relying on, already have for a lot of what we do with Fiona and the platform, but is actually using tools that allow you to program content so that it's not reinventing the wheel each time that you do it. And there was one other thing I was going to say is, just having guests on. So that's kind of what I was saying for us. But, is there not some folks that they would be able to either curate or partner with to help subsidize content within like their community? So Prometheus, I'll use their name, but one of the portfolios we have out in the West Coast, they think very much in terms of neighborhoods, not communities. So they go past the community, and just like we started, as I was talking about 30 lines, they are always thinking about the neighborhood. And therefore, shouldn't the neighborhood be a part of the whole content strategy? And this is just all speaking of ways that you can lighten the load. That doesn't talk about distribution. That's just more, how do you produce and manufacture more content without saying, hey, property manager, or hey, Digible, do this all for us. You get kind of a committee together, and then you need to have somebody ultimately that kind of owns the guidelines, the brand guidelines, if you will, like what do the standards look like? And that would include by platform, because you mentioned, David, that social might be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit easier place to start than because it is dynamic and the content does move on, instead of the stagnant or kind of more static content that lives on the website.
Yeah, I think depending on the brand, there's some really fun, I'll say, branches on what you just talked about. So everyone does these review campaigns, right? Where they're like trying to get more reviews. Hey, please leave us a review and thank us for the work we've done, blah, blah, blah. And usually when someone does a review campaign, they can get a decent response, right? But here's my concept. Back to your like user generated, it's hard to get users to, like, as you said, like write an article or a blog or something for you. But a testimonial goes a long way. And we know how powerful those reviews are, just showing Google that you have four stars and 22 reviews or whatever. So what if you just monitor your reviews that you're getting? Hey, we did a review blast. You see that Annie Ann has left a positive review. It's really easy to tell who left the review that's still a current resident. And then you have your property manager reach out to Annie Ann and thank her and say like, wow, thank you so much, Annie, for leaving this great review. Hey, by the way, would you, seems like you're a fan, would you mind if we just took a 3-minute like testimonial video of you, like just basically rereading your review or saying why you love living here? And I think about it very similar to like when I first heard of Rent Grata and how they had the widget and you were talking to your the residents talking to residents. I was like, who the hell is going to do this? And well, shoot, they've made it worth their while. And I view the same, it's almost the same thing here. It's your own version of Rent Grata. So it doesn't cost you anything. You do a review promotion. You ask them to come. You have the property manager or whoever, leasing assistant, hold just their iPhone up and record that, like Annie Ann saying, hey, this is what I love about, I don't know, the pool or whatever it is. And you could do it in different, like do one video from someone in the clubhouse, one at the pool, whoever, whatever. And then you can obviously publish that on social. And then my point here is you could make a page of the website that's dedicated basically to reviews. And you can have your testimonials there, but then as you get like 5, 6, 7 of these things, they don't have to be my argument here is they don't have to be ultra professionally produced. I'm saying do it basically like Blair Witch style. People are saying good things about you. It works. And so I know some people are protective of their brands. They'd probably want it more professionally filmed, but I'm more advocating like it's better to have it than to not have it.
Yeah, totally. I'm not going to let Annie Ann slide here. Hopefully it's not a cousin of yours or something, but I feel sorry for anybody that does have that name. It could be like out of a Coen Brothers, like somewhere in the deep South, right? Where they were like, well, we got a last name. What's the first name going to be? Ann, how about Annie? Yeah. Okay. Annie Ann. That sounds good. Let's go. Yeah. Sorry. It's late in the day, but trying to think how I was going to react to. Oh yeah. I was going to talk about TikTok a little bit, my favorite subject the last few weeks, but I really did dig, some of the creative ideas that guy, what was his name? It doesn't matter. Ethan or something. Anyways, that he's sharing some different concepts that property managers potentially could develop pretty easily on their own, that just make the property feel way more inviting. And certainly the post itself is really organic. And I think the testimonials you're talking about take me into, you've heard this one before, but my When Harry Met Sally, kind of concept or thing.
Bring that up.
Well, it's great though. It is fun to see those stories come together. So, so this doesn't stay an inside kind of, I guess, joke or thread between me and David. That idea is, take these testimonials and say, hey, what was the path, between the community and in this case, the resident, or, for us, it's a client, it's a customer, and have them sit together, I beg your pardon, on a couch similar to the movie, where they just share that experience, and should come off as, I would hope, pretty authentic and fun to watch. And you could do a series of those, like on that same page you were talking about developing for reviews, with testimonials. But the key is just extending those, which is what you're obviously getting at, finding ways to really leverage those pieces, and that takes again some of the pressure off of developing it from scratch. I do think, and I don't know how much this goes on, and we're going to have a follow-up with some folks from Lincoln about this idea about the competition, which resident creates the best TikTok video gets like $100 off rent. But why not have some that like ongoing content, kind of reciprocal relationship between the community and its residents, and do it with an incentive, like I think it'd be fun. So I'd look forward to seeing that. And then you could even rotate through different platforms. So it's not always, just TikTok videos, but you could have some other pieces of content and see what people come up with.
Yeah, totally. Well, I always love getting the residents involved. It obviously the success of that always depends on the people on site and how good they are at promoting. So you almost need three strategies, and we were talking about this with TikTok content, but you need one, like if this is all on corporate's back, what does it look like, right? If one where it's like, okay, property manager involved, but they're not good at recruiting the residents. And then the third one, if someone can actually recruit residents. And then, I'm more of a fan of just picking a channel and dominating more than I am like trying to like try my hand at everything. And so it's like, if you're more comfortable with email, work on your email sequencing. If you're more comfortable with like writing articles, let's say, or fleshing out more content on the site, go that way. But I think people they almost get a little too deer in headlines. In fact, we did that originally with our content. We were just too worried about where to get started. We had grandiose ideas, and then we're like, well, shoot, now what? And it wasn't until we just started making it, focusing on one area that it started to really take off.
Yep. Well, I agree with that strategy because inevitably, if you do start to dominate or gain traction in one platform, then you have the audience now to extend into these other platforms that they're going to be ingesting content. And that's great because then you'll start to build up frequency and just further strengthen that relationship. But yeah, if you get 1,000, 2,000 people that are really starting to like engage with you on any platform, then that's something that you should be able to parlay into some of the other ones. And then you get that flywheel and that ripple effect that starts getting just some organic referrals and things like that. So, cost wise, like as we talk about scaling this, like if you were a property manager, or I'll say more, maybe somebody with the budgets, like the RPM, what would you be willing to commit? If you felt like a sound plan was there, you were buying in, what do you think is a reasonable price point for these properties if they're considering content?
Well, it certainly depends on the type of content, right? It's pretty simple ish to find somebody's cousin or whoever, like an agency or whatever, that can jump in and run some social, like just build some social content, and probably feels way more approachable for the on-site team too, just because they're probably familiar with those platforms. For the email stuff, I feel like that's the one that the operator is going to see the most like bang for buck, which then means like the RPM and the property manager, where they can all of a sudden, we've seen it with our own like drip campaigns on when we've done email sequencing for clients. And with our campaigns, it's like you go from like an inbound person, like converting it, I don't know, let's just make up a number, like 40-50%, to now like where our conversion rate is on a lead, it tends to be 75 to 80% that come in. Now, a lot of that is because we're I'll say the folks that we talk to are definitely well targeted now, right? Like we do apartment marketing and we specialize in these things and yada yada, and we have now the credibility with the referrals and all that stuff. But I'm more just like trying, if you lift that and take it to apartments, the email campaigns can easily double your conversion rate, because instead of having a follow-up time where it's 48 or 72 hours later, or maybe I forget for a week to contact Annie Ann or whatever, right? But now it just does it for me. That just makes it, it just takes a lot of the, I guess it's almost like an insurance policy, I think of, like, right? Like if your on-site team gets overwhelmed and they can't finish all their sales tasks for the day, you have this insurance policy where it's just doing the follow-up for you. And so I think they will easily see a dramatic lift in their conversion rate if they apply something like that. So back to your budget question on that, heck, I would easily throw $1,500 if I couldn't do it myself at someone setting up my email sequence, just to get it done. Like even if it's only two emails deep, it's at least something. And then for the content for the site, that's where obviously you can get, it depends what you're looking for. You can get crazy, but again, I would probably run a test over several months. That's somewhere between like $800, $1,200 probably for 3 months in a row to see if I'm getting any action off of it. But you can also go cheap with that, where it's like, again, with the personalized pop-ups, like software to help you with the personalized pop-ups that connect to your CRM. Like you can end up buying some of that stuff for like $20 a month. And so then it's more of the sweat equity of setting it up and tweaking the A/B tests of what different users see.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense. We both talked about that, just more, I guess, fantasized. Sounds like a funny word every time I use that, but about moving that budget, like carving out the ILS, of course, that would be where we'd start. But, some of the bigger buckets and just saying, hey, for 6 months, give us, $1,000 to $2,000 to work just on content and let's see what happens. But that's a really tough experiment. I don't know if we'll ever get there. We may have to do that independently in order to prove that out. But I was just going to say, well, I agreed with you and I still do that I would go all in on one property. I also could see that, just getting kind of shredded by bar RPMs or anybody else trying to, frankly, defend why not to continue spending, meaning that it might require 5 properties, like just so that you don't have somebody saying, oh, well, that's an outlier, there's seasonality or whatever other reason they try to kind of discredit the numbers. I think it'd be probably better if you want to have a chance at like rolling out a broader content strategy across your portfolio. You probably need 5 in order to really prove it out.
Yeah, for the scientific test. Yeah, I think there's when we were saying going all in on one property, for me it was more around the sweat equity of it all, more than it was around the spend. On the spend, you definitely, there's more folks have to get involved on that side of things. And there could be some stuff you do at a corporate level. So if you're one of these brands that really is trying to build your corporate brand, then the Harry Met Sally thing is a great way to go. Oh, why do I live at a Red Peak property or a Bainbridge property or whatever, right? And then, and then like lift that and drop that across every site. So it's not specific to that one property, but it's because you're going with a brand a company that really cares about the brand. And it's like, this is why you care to live with Bainbridge or whatnot.
Yeah, totally. I wonder whether, something I'll say like the Digible Dudes could ever gain traction. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the community, meaning, the residents there. But if they took a more informal or casual approach and just kind of shot the shit, I'll say, about living not just at that community, but in the neighborhood, getting back to that whole neighborhood concept and just, sustain a commitment to it instead of like, here's what happens when your toilet overflows. Like, you call Jack and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that would be terrible. But if you made terrible it more,
Jack.
You're right, exactly. Jackie Jack. I should have said that from the beginning. But something that would appeal more to, let's just say, a casual resident, where it's like, oh, well, they're talking about like kind of nightlife in and around, this property, or here's some of the cool like restaurants. So thinking in the vein of, my favorite idea has always been listicles, one of the easiest things to generate, and you could whip it up so quickly, and those things often get shared. But if you thought in those terms and then turn that into, a podcast for the property, that would be interesting just to see if you got some traction with something like that. I just, obviously you and I do this all the time, but I invite, like that, kind of random, just test things and see if you get any traction. And that's something that potentially you didn't know you had right underneath you that you could start to scale.
Yeah, some more like guerrilla marketing methods. What's interesting about, I don't think to your neighborhood thing, I know corporate would probably be scared to death that their like leasing team was like building a podcast for their property, but you're probably not going to get a lot of organic folks that would find it, but it's more of the word of mouth. Mm-hmm. Because if, let's say you start and you interview resident A, right? Well, resident A is going to be like, holy hell, I was on a podcast, check this out, right? And they're going to share it to their network. And right. So I think it's going to be almost a smaller version of influencer marketing if you went that way, where you just have 200 residents there and slowly you go through all of them, interviewing them about the whatever, and they all share it to their friends and family. So way more likely to get that shared to someone's network than someone like just upvoting your apartment post about guacamole.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, the 30 Lines guy was having a little fun with, him plugging his chat bot or whatever it was that day at TechCon. But now I'm going to shamelessly plug like a little bit of what's coming, from Digible. But And no problem sharing part of the secret sauce, a big part of it, but is using that natural language generation. NLG is hitting so many different platforms and publishers, and it's just a way to scale things. So for those that aren't familiar with that, it's just a matter of rule-based, content. And so usually you kind of have to work off of data, true, false statements, that kind of stuff. And then that triggers different content. And Dave and I both have been kind of, again, I'll use the F word, except it's fantasizing, not, but is just, all the different applications. And this could help crack that nut where you could actually generate a lot more Google posts. You could generate more social posts. You could do a lot more content on your site. I mean, it opens the door for a lot, but it does require quite a bit of programming, and that's where obviously a property wouldn't be able to deliver that. And that's one of the things we're both excited about bringing into the industry. So stay tuned for that. I don't think I've ever done such a shameless plug in the 72 episodes or whatever that we've done, but I do think it's going to be a pretty cool
because you're so excited about it, right? Like, it's so hard to scale content. We're giving ideas here where people from a sweat equity standpoint can take their baby property and do it. But if you're trying to pay someone to do it, content is it's really expensive. It's funny though about that. It's like, we think of it being expensive because most people are equating it to the paid media budget. And like, okay, well, I have like $2,000 or $4,000 or whatever. But if you look at like how much a custom website costs, where you can get upwards of $30K. I mean, I know you can get them done for $15K and you can get them done for $7K, depending who you're going to. But I've seen many budgets around like a custom brand and then custom website over $30K. All of a sudden, if you're then paying $1,000 a month for someone to write content, it shouldn't sound crazy. I think it's just because one's coming out of like the initial lease up budget, and then one is more like after lease up, what are we doing? So be interesting to find someone that is willing to sort of step out on a limb, kind of what you were saying, and take some of their marketing budget and from the put it into content, because you can write that stuff and then bank it. Like, you don't have to release all of it at once. So if in the first 12 months of your property, when you have that large budget, you could put $1,500 to $2,000 a month to it, stack these articles or whatever, and then just like slowly drip them out each month afterwards.
Yeah, I think that you can't, it's kind of, well, I guess you can, I mean, just deal with the consequences if you don't keep up with it. But that's the cautionary tale here. The warning is you don't want to set any kind of expectation or put this kind of effort in and then suddenly just flame out. It's just not a good look. So that's the only thing I'd say is if you do move forward down this path, then make a commitment to at least a year, especially like you said, those longer holds. I mean, I wouldn't really advocate for this too much, probably on the shorter term, 2 years and under, like if they're just trying to turn the property over. But if you're in for a 5 to 10 year like length or hold, then I think it makes a ton of sense, like you said earlier, to test a bunch of different stuff. But the main thing is the commitment. And you've been great about that. I don't mind giving you a little love here on our podcast, but just staying super committed, to getting content out each week. And it does make a huge difference. At this point, I can't imagine like seeing 6 week to 8 week gap or something. So
I like Gita looked me in the eye when we were starting it. She's like, "You're going to do this each week?" And I was like, "I will commit to you now." Back when I couldn't commit to anything because things were nuts, I'm like, "I will get this done each week." I have a slight reminder of, I'm sure you hated this movie, Reid, but did you remember the movie Armageddon?
Trying to forget it, but yeah, I did see that movie. It's one of my all-time like worst acted like giant action budget films like ever produced. Yeah.
I knew you would hate it. But I remember Bruce Willis is like, in the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never missed my mark, and I'm not going to do it now. And that's what I think about with the podcast.
I unfortunately very much remember that scene. That was not one of Bruce Willis's finer moments, but they used it in the trailer like 80,000 times.
Yeah.
Oh boy, Armageddon. That's right up there with God, what's the other apocalyptic? I think it was Ben Affleck or with Morgan Freeman. Nah, there's too many. Yeah, maybe that. Yeah. Well, anyways, when we start to get to Bruce Willis, movies and quotes, that's probably a sign that we're running low on content. No pun intended. But yeah, I'm excited to as I said, see what we can do to disrupt this whole scene with the industry, and hopefully start a new trend. But I think it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, and at the very least, on your own, like folks can follow up with their own email sequences, work on that. Definitely make sure that the copy feels unique to their property today on their website, because you just don't want to just read like every other website. You need to be somewhat memorable. And then after you get through those things, you can start working on some small things like personalization. And so there's a couple different programs for that. Like I know Write Message is really interesting. You could get more complex and use something like VWO, but there's a lot of different things out there that they kind of blend conversion rate optimization with personalized messaging, and they're not expensive. You just have to make the hookups. So anyways, you can always call us too, and we can happily walk you through it. I know we're probably going to run some tests here before long to see if it's scalable.
Yep.
All right. Well, anything else, Reid?
Well, just reminder, like, don't put all the pressure on yourself. Work with a third party, be it Digible or somebody else. There's plenty of talented freelance copywriters around, more than you might realize, especially in this environment. So you might get some discounted content from some folks in the local area, and then engage your residents, curate content. That's another easy way. Take some of the pressure off. Just make sure you're sharing things, and then find ways to engage with your community, meaning your neighborhood. And then I love the listicles, so that's another fun one to just kind of get going. But yeah, I think these are all hopefully helpful tips, and we'll shake things up here soon enough.
Cool. Well, we'll catch you guys next week.